New EU legislation with new tools in the fight against terrorism while protecting Europeans' data privacy. It's all about striking a balance between European security and protection of their individual rights. Hello and welcome to People First, the EPP Group's monthly program on issues with impact on people like you. Joining us to answer some of your questions is Monika Hohlmeier. You're a member of the committee here on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and you're also the EPP Group's coordinator on these issues, so a good person to talk about these issues. How much safer should Europeans feel as a result of these two pieces of legislation?
I think both pieces of legislation are very important. So one, the passenger name record, deals with the issue that we try to know how terrorists are traveling, how criminals are traveling, which ways they are using, and a part of it is the possibility that they take planes, that they are using aviation as one way. And till now there were just Great Britain, Spain and Belgium had passenger name record. Now it's the whole European Union. We hope that we can decide this already in February or March in the plenary. At the moment, the Social Democrats try to delay it a little bit, but I think that the Social Democrat governments, they really need this instrument and they want to have decided it in the plenary.
Okay, let's look a little bit more at the details of both these pieces of legislation in our report. The horrific terror attacks in 2015 stirred a new push for stronger investigative powers coupled with privacy safeguards. A passenger name records agreement, which would allow the international exchange of airline passenger information, was repeatedly shelved. But a breakthrough in negotiations allowed the proposed PNR legislation to progress. Final parliamentary approval is expected early this year. That's more than 4 years after the European Commission's initial proposal, due to resistance among some political parties. The agreement limits PNR data storage to 5 years. The data may only be used for, quote, prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of terrorist offenses and serious crimes. The legislation says passengers should be clearly informed about the collection of PNR data and their rights. It mandates a review of the PNR directive 2 years after the deadline to adopt it in national laws in 2018. Meanwhile, a new data protection directive, to be approved in Parliament early this year, finally updates the one from 1995, before the Internet era. It synchronizes privacy laws across the EU 28, with heavy fines against companies that don't comply. Among the measures, it sets tougher requirements for obtaining consent to use a person's information. It raises the age of consent to 16 years old from 13. It enshrines the so-called right to be forgotten, meaning a person can request a company to delete his or her data. And it requires companies to notify authorities of a data breach within 72 hours. So why did it take so long to get this legislation through?
These are very complicated legislations.
A lot of politics.
Yes, a lot of politics.
Well, and then let's take a look at one aspect of that data protection, which is this right to be forgotten. We have a question from one of our the people we talked to.
Mein Name ist Dennis Nitsche, ich komme aus Reutlingen, Deutschland und wollte fragen, ob das überhaupt möglich ist, alle meine Daten aus dem Internet löschen zu lassen.
So what are the limits? Can you really have the right, can you really be forgotten 100% on the Internet?
That's not possible because there are different legal aspects. There is a right of, if you have said something in public, and I say something as politician to a journalist and it's printed in a newspaper, then you cannot go to the IT company or to a provider and say, please delete this because I said something wrong. So that's not possible. Right. But if a company uses your private data, if your private data are misused, then you clearly have the right to say, I want to have deleted this, you didn't have the right.
What about Internet privacy? What about for those who want to go on the Internet and surf? How private can that be?
Mein Name ist Kara, ich komme von Deutschland und meine Frage ist, wie man privat im Internet surfen kann.
Okay, like he said, I mean, for web surfers, how much can this data protection directive protect people who are basically on this Internet, which some people call a global village, right?
It is a global village, but with the data protection regulation, there are some rules. So not everybody has the right to profile you. you have to allow if you to a company to profile you. This means that, for example, if you choose some holidays at the Croatian border, then suddenly appear some more offers for holidays in Croatia. So that's this typical profiling. That's the kind of profiling that is really used by a lot of users. But there are other kinds of profiling not liked by the users. So to this you can say, no, it is not allowed, I don't wish it, you have to be asked.
The data protection directive raises the consent age to 16 from 13. What does that mean practically on the internet?
Now, this point in the regulation means that not a 13-year-old child has a right to give a consent to somebody. Then the child needs the parents. Because we see that especially 13, 14, 15-year-old children, they don't think so much if they say yes to something because they don't understand the text or they don't realize what this really means for them.
And for shoppers, how are they protected on the internet? Here's a question about that.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Thiago et je suis du Luxembourg. Je voulais savoir si mes données bancaires sont protégées lorsque j'utilise sur Internet.
Okay, when we hear about data breaches every now and then, millions of people's data is exposed of their credit cards and bank records and that kind of thing. How is this directive going to protect these people or prevent this from happening?
If they have really sensitive data as your credit card, your bank account, some personal data, then the requirements are very, very strong. They have to have really a strong protection. The banks have a strong protection, but still it is a problem that sometimes per day we have 700,000 malware.
Wow.
700,000, sometimes it's only 500,000 or 300,000, but there is a lot of malware around. So we really try to trace it and to give Europol and other police institutions the possibility to help the banks, but the banks really have very strict requirements and the data protection regulation really asks for this. And if there is a breach, if there is a problem, then they have to go to the official institutions.
Within 72 hours, I think, right?
Within 72 hours,
yeah.
Because we had the problem that a lot of institutions, fearing for their reputation, didn't want to cooperate with police.
Right.
So now they are really forced to talk about their breaches and to guarantee afterwards this kind of breach cannot be cannot happen the second time. So the regulation brings more protection there.
Let's shift to passenger name records, PNR, about the provisions of getting rid of certain information after a certain number of years. Let's take a look at that.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Marion, je suis de la France et ma question c'est pourquoi rayer l'information des passagers 5 ans après?
Okay, so after 5 years, can we explain this? After 5 years, information is removed from data banks?
That's true. Normally, the data are the most useful in the first 1 or 2 years. Sometimes you need them in the 3rd or 4th or 5th years. We see in the experience of member states having already PNR systems that in the 6th or 7th year it's really nearly never needed. Normal passengers of a flight, their data never are detected. But if you are a criminal and if you use an airplane, then it's quite much often that the police finds a match. But after 5 years, normally this is sufficient. We will have the new experience if we try it 5 years.
Final question. You grew up well aware of security issues. Your father was Franz Josef Strauss, government minister, head of the Bavarian government. Perhaps you could explain why Europe struggles to find this balance between privacy and security. It has to do with history, it has to do with values, doesn't it?
Yes, I have a long experience because I had 25 years. Our family needed security measures against terrorism, and this kind of terrorism was a smaller kind of terrorism than we are facing now. Now we are facing a terrorism of a huge size, and it's an international terrorism going over several states in this world and touching Europe very, very heavily. And what I don't understand is some discussion that if we understand data protection in a too liberalized way, then and if we mistrust the policeman, then, for example, nobody of our citizens will understand why, for example, our border guards have no right to see if a person in front of them is a terrorist or is a criminal already in the data banks of our police, of Europol. They have no right to see those data. We need data exchange to have security for our population, and I know it is best.
So this legislation strikes that balance.
Yes.
Monika Hohlmeier, thank you very much for joining us. That's it for now on People First. Find out more about the activities of the largest political force in Parliament by checking eppgroup.eu. Until next time, thanks for watching.